So here we are, meditating on just 10. Come on, shout out just 10. Anyone remembers what all we have covered? Yeah? Let's see what all we have covered. We are going in the reverse order. We finished 6 of them, right? All right, let's go. What is it? It says, number 1, do not covet or be content. Do not give false testimony. We saw how we can hold on to the truth. Do not steal. Okay, then we looked at do not commit adultery. Come on, you can read it with me. Do not murder. Honor your father and mother. Okay, 6 of these commands we already covered. And I want to tell you, all these 6 commandments were all connected with man. Something we have to do with other person, other people, okay? But the next set of 4 commandments is all about God. Everything relates to God for the next 4 commands, okay? So we are looking at the 4th commandment. Now the fourth commandment is one of the longest, most specific, and most detailed of all the other commandments, okay? If you look into your Bible in Exodus chapter 20, you'll find this, okay? But this 4th commandment covers 3 verses at least. And this is the commandment of time. Not any action. Like the rest of the 6 that we read, it's all about actions and attitudes that we should have. But this commandment talks about time. So you find that in Exodus chapter 20, reading from verse 8. Exodus chapter 20, reading from verse 8. Can we all read it together today? Yeah, it says like this. Come on, 3, 2, 1. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord. And on it you shall not do any work. Do you have it? Okay. Neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. Now, a lot of times when you come to church, if you grow up in church, you hear this word. But if you haven't grown up in church, you might be wondering, what is Sabbath all about? What is this word called Sabbath is all about, okay? So this is such one of the words that church people use a lot. We don't use a lot, though, the word Sabbath. But the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word called Shabbat. It comes from the Hebrew word called Shabbat, which means to cease, to stop working. That's the word Shabbat. Now, I would encourage you to go actually look at the sermon that's being preached at Banjara Hills today, because Pastor Sandeep did an amazing thing, how you can remember all these commands. Okay, like a Sunday school thing. I think you should go check it out. It's amazing. So we're going to look at this 4th commandment. Okay, it says Sabbath. The Sabbath refers to doing nothing related to work for a 24-hour period. Every week. Okay, it refers to doing nothing related to work for a 24-hour period. It refers to this unit of time around which are to orient our lives. And even as we have read, it says it is holy. Holy means to be separated. Okay, other than the 6 days. Now, if you carefully observe that commandment, it's interesting what all it's recorded, okay? Every other commandment you'll find in a line, in a sentence, but this one has a lot of sentences to it. It says, 6 days, if I can go back to verse 9, Exodus 20 verse 9 says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And it says, on it you shall not do any work, all right? Get that, no work. Someone speak it out, no work. Neither you, nor your son or daughter. Now what does the next one says? Nor your. Have you ever observed that? How many have maids at home? I think we should consider this a little bit more in our lives. It says they should also, not your male or female servant, not your animals, not anybody residing in our town. You know, God is the one who originated Sabbath. God is the one who thought about Sabbath. Okay, you find that right there in Genesis in chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2 verse 1. It says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. You see, God is the one who started it all off. Now, I heard Pastor Sandeep say this morning, he said, God did not rest because he was tired doing all the work for 6 days. God did not rest because he was tired. No, he was setting a pattern. He was setting a pattern for all of us to follow. He says 6 days you got to work, and one day you got to choose to rest. Not do anything specific to your work. So God created, God worked, so we are to work. God rested, so we also have to rest. God is setting a pattern for us to find a rhythm for our lives, to have a rhythm of work and also a rhythm of rest. That's what God wants us to do. Now, why did God did that? Why was Moses talking about that? Why did God give this command to Moses? You got to understand the background of the children of Israel. Children of Israel lived as slaves in Egypt for over 400 years. They never had a day off. 400 years, okay? Every day they had to work. They were treated as tools. They were treated as machines to build pyramids. Okay, they were treated as labor without having an option to take a break. 7 days a week, all year long. And you can imagine how deeply this must have been ingrained into our lives, that if there is no other thing except work, 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 work. So that's how the children of Israel were for 400 years. And that was totally against the pattern that God wanted his children to have. Because we see God worked and God rested. But for children of Israel, it was just work, 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 day after day. So when he delivers the children of Israel and he brings them and he promises them to take into the promised land, and right there in the wilderness, he brings out this, says, I am not like them. I am not like the Egyptians. They've mistreated you. But this is not how I designed your lives to be. And he says, this is how your life should be. And he speaks to Moses about this. And he says, one day in a week, you should take a day off. Someone shout out, day off. If I can rename this sermon, I can say this is a day off sermon. A day off sermon. Says you need to take a day off. He affirmed that they were sacred human beings. He showed them how to live according to their God-given nature. Just take a day off. And 40 years again, imagine this. 400 years of slavery, they come out, and in the wilderness, they're doing only one thing. Walking, walking, walking. No work. Just that's their work. Walking, walking, walking. And before they enter into the promised land, now Moses brings this up again with the children of Israel. And you see the same commandment repeated in Deuteronomy chapter 5. Now interestingly, if you observe the first one, there is quite a difference when Moses reiterates this command. Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 12. It says, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You see that again over here. It reiterates, your male servant and female servant may rest, okay, as you. Now, verse 15, it says, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Now, Exodus talks about remember the Sabbath day, but Deuteronomy talks about as a commandment. It says, this is a command from God that you should keep the Sabbath holy. And what you should do when you're keeping the Sabbath, verse 15 says, you shall remember. Everyone, remember. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So Moses says, yes, it's just not a day off. Not a day off just to relax, not rest. But it says it's a day off not only to rest, but also to remember. Remember that once upon a time you were slaves in Egypt, but God with his power, with his mighty hand, he delivered you out of Egypt. And he says you need to learn to remember every time you take a Sabbath. That's what God said. Rest, remember. Remember and rest. So the Sabbath was always a hallmark for the Jewish community. Throughout their history, even today, they observe Sabbath, okay? This act, perhaps more than any other, kept them from the pressure of the powerful cultures that were around them. So the Sabbath calls us to build the doing of nothing. This will be countercultural for us in the times that we live in. The calls to build the doing of nothing into our schedules each week. Each week. Some people might say it's inefficient or it's unproductive and useless. But God says it is needed and it is commanded. Now, Eugene Patterson says like this, okay? He says, Sabbath is not primarily about us or how it benefits us. It is about God and how God forms us. If we are going to live appropriately in the creation, we must keep the Sabbath. I want to encourage you today. If you can learn to live like this, you will experience God in a total different way. I believe God is inviting us to something so amazing that if we implement it, it has the power to change our lives. Now, the Jewish pattern of Sabbath starts on Friday night, Friday evening. Okay, till all the way sunset on Saturday evening. That was their Sabbath. That's how they observed Sabbath. That's traditional Jewish. 6 p.m. probably on Friday all the way till Saturday, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. evening. That's the time they follow the Sabbath. Okay? Now today, how do we implement this in our lives? Okay, how do we implement this in our lives? I know most of you, hopefully you'll get a 2-day off. Okay, right? Your 2-day off. So we will look at how we're going to implement this in our lives when we take those rests and how God's desire for us to have this rhythm in our lives. Okay, so I want to bring out 3 things that we should stop doing. 3 things that we should stop doing. Even as we look at how we can prevent workout. So if you're going to follow your life groups, you must have studied it. Maybe you're going to do this week. How do we prevent from a burnout? Okay, so the Sabbath is first and foremost a day of stopping. To stop, that's the literal meaning of the word Sabbath. Okay, I know that's a struggle for all of us. We can't stop. We can't stop. We think we need to do. Okay, but I want to tell you this. When you implement this in your life, you're saying, on Sabbath, I embrace my limits. I embrace my limits and acknowledge God is the one who is the Lord of my life. 3 things that we need to stop, okay? Number 1, stop working. That's what Sabbath is all about. Stop working. Now we live in a work-obsessed culture, right? Am I right? We live in a work-obsessed culture. You got to grind. You got to do it. You got to outwork others. That's the thing, right? You better go. Better get ahead of everybody. Climb that ladder. You got to climb the corporate ladder. You got to do this, man. You can't take a break. You need to go. Prove yourself. Prove yourself to your bosses. Prove yourself to your bosses. Okay? And some of us wear busyness like a badge of honor. Man, I'm busy. I'm crazily busy. Right? We make it as a badge of honor. Something to be proud of. You know, if you look at our work style, probably you'll work, if you work 5 days a week, 8 hours a shift, okay? 40 hours, okay? 40 hours. But have you ever observed yourself? Your work never stops once you get out of the office. Right? You know why? Because even when you're coming back home and thinking, okay, I need to finish this job. I need to get this work done by tomorrow. I need to sort this one. I hope my team is doing good. My team will do well. Your mind is always going on and on and on and on. Right? You come to a Saturday when you get a day off, but still your mind is working. Say, okay, I got to get this presentation ready for Monday morning. I need to get this set up right. So you add another 10 to 15 hours of your life. It's all the time you're going. The Bible says clearly, okay? You got to stop working for a day at least. What do I mean by stop working? Get out of that office mindset. Get out of thinking about the office. Get out thinking about your work. Allocate a 24-hour period where you're not even going to think about work. It's got to be a full disconnect. Oh, some of us might say, okay, no, you don't understand, bro. You know, how can I not start working? No, if I don't work, no, everything is going to fall. Everything is going to go wrong if I don't work. Somehow we have built ourselves into that thinking pattern system, and that's a problem. Nothing should stop falling when you don't work. If you think that way, then you didn't do your job well. If you are a leader, you got to make sure that you're raising up somebody who can do your job, who will be able to work better than you probably. Think about this. God made the world in 6 days and this world is still running. It's still running. It took a day of 7th day and still running. Where did we get that from? Right? That things are going to fall if you don't work. If you're a child of Jesus, if you're a follower of God, I want you to know, you give it to God, you commit yourself to God and says, okay, it's going to go. It's not going to fall. It's not going to fall. So it's time to stop working. So if you're going to stop working, what you should do? We should start resting. Come on, say that. Start resting. Stop working. Start resting. Start resting. Now you might be saying, how can I do that? But this is how Jesus is encouraging us to take rest. Okay? In Matthew chapter 11 verse 28 he says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You see, true rest is with Jesus only. It's with Jesus only. But you know what? The following verse also says something powerful. Verse 29, it says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. It says, take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. He's saying something, okay, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. This is the picture he's giving you. Have you ever been looking at fields? People who farm. Okay, nowadays we have tractors, we can farm, but people who don't have tractors, what do they use for farming? They use oxen, right? And the oxen are always tied to a pole, what we call a yoke. Here's, if you can get the picture, that's it. Actually wanted to get that one, couldn't get it. The oxen. The yoke. Now the yoke is always tied to two donkeys, two oxen. It's paid, it's always paid. That's when the work will be efficient. That's when the work will be done in a quicker and a smoother way. So what is God telling us when he says, take my yoke upon you? He's saying, hey, you don't do it alone. You don't do it alone. You said, you come out with me. You come out with me. Let me be the other ox with you. And let's go do it together. He's saying you need to come and yoke yourself to me. That's what Jesus says. And let's do this together. Quit trying to do it yourself. Actually, the Message Bible says something really interesting. In the same verse in Matthew 11:28, the Message Bible says, are you tired? How many of us are today? Worn out? Burnt out on religion? He said, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. So instead of working, God says rest. And the only way we can find rest is when we yoke ourselves with Jesus. Jesus says, you need to work from a place of rest, not work towards a rest. So many of us work towards a rest. Every week you're looking, okay, when does Friday come? When does Saturday come? But God says, hey, you don't have to worry about that. It says, if you allow me, if you get myself into your life, he says, I'll make it easy for you because we're going to do it together. Do it together. So, my friends, stop working, start resting. I don't know how it looks out for you, but make sure you get that implemented in your life. The second thing that we can stop is stop wanting. That's how Sabbath will fit in. Stop wanting. The reason you work more is because you want more. Am I right? The reason you do this is because you want more. You want this big one. We live in a culture that constantly wants something. This living culture, every advertisement is screaming at you. You need to have this. You need to have this today. All the advertisements are screaming at you. It's taking your space and say, you need to have this. You need to have this kind of car. Oh, you're having a Santro? Oh, you need to get a better one than that. You need a bigger house. Always wanting. And God says, you need to get into Sabbath. Sabbath is not about wanting, my friends. So many times that's our mindset. Paul says in Colossians chapter 3, verse 1, he says, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. What is Observing the Sabbath. How do you prevent a burnout? Is when you stop wanting more. So when you come into Sabbath, it's not about wanting more. When it's rest, it's not about wanting more. You need to get that mindset off. It's not about wanting more, wanting more, wanting more. Our desires not have to be on earthly things. The Bible says, set your things on above. So we stop wanting, right? We stop wanting and we start receiving. Come on. Stop wanting and we start receiving. What a shift, right? That's what Sabbath is all about. When you learn to stop wanting and say, God, I want to receive everything that you have for me. I start receiving all that God has for me in that place of rest, on that posture of receiving. I want to receive God, you, God. You know, we come into a service like this and we can sing songs so beautiful. And we mean it. We mean all the songs that we are singing. But some of the songs that we are singing are so interesting in our lives, okay? We grow up crying out saying, Jesus, you can have all this world. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Or something like that. I don't want anything else. I don't need anything else. You are my one thing. You are my one thing. How about that? Sing songs, okay? I just need you. I just need you. And we mean it with all, at this moment of at the time of singing, you mean it with all your heart. But the moment you step out of the door, you want everything else. Right? We mean it. I'm not against, we mean it. It's genuine. It's genuine. You mean it. But somehow we forget it. And when you get out, we just upset about things that are not going the way. That guy is close. That guy did not give me anything. So instead of wanting more, Jesus is saying, start receiving from me. And that's what we heard in our communion time. John chapter 15 verse 5 says, if you learn to abide in me, okay, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. If we learn to abide, we will receive from him. So second thing we got to stop. Stop wanting and start receiving. The third thing that we should be stopping. This is going to be a challenging one for all of us. You should stop worrying. Come on, say stop worrying. The hardest one for all. That's why we have a dedicated month for mental health. Because we struggle with this area. So many people are depressed. Okay, in different ways. You see, the root of all anxiety is worry. I'm worried about the future. You know, we are warrior champions. Champion warriors. So much our prayer warriors have become prayer warriors. Champion. Oh, I don't know what my future is going to hold. I don't know. Oh, I don't worry about my finances, about my kids, about my health, about my family, and the list goes on and on. And anxiety is the root cause. Worry is the root cause of all anxiety. Worried about the future. You need to get to the place of Sabbath when you stop worrying about it. You know, why can't we take a rest? Why can't we take a mind off our work? Because you're always start worrying about how will my family live? Right? Look at what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6 verse 27. It says, come on, let's read this together. It says what? And which of you, By being anxious, we somehow got that all wrong. And we think, okay, if I worry more, I'll make more. If I worry more, I'll gain more. You'll gain weight. Definitely. You'll gain sickness. Definitely. It says, by worrying, you're not going to add 1 hour of your life. Instead, you'll deduct an hour of your life. Sickness, diseases, illnesses is all because of stress and anxiety, most of them. First thing, are you stressed about anything? That's what the doctors ask us, right? Are you stressed about anything? Jesus says in verse 34 of the same chapter, Matthew 6:34, he says, therefore, do not be anxious about do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day. That's a great mantra to live by, if I can say that. I know it's not easy. I struggle with it. But somehow, this is the rest. This is the Sabbath that God wants us to know. To come to a place when you stop worrying. That's what the job of the enemy is. To steal, kill, destroy. He wants you to worry. He wants you to be anxious all the time. That's what he wants you to be. Because if he can get you to that place, he knows that he can defeat you. So we should stop worrying. So once we stop worrying, what we should be doing? We should start releasing. Stop worrying, start releasing. Release all your worries to God. He's the only one who can take care of it. That's what in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7 says, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. We have a God who is not a worrier. We don't serve a God who's worried about how can I feed my children tomorrow, how they're going to live tomorrow. He's not worried about anything at all. He's not a worrier. It says, cast all your anxieties on me. You were never meant to carry that. So that's why I want to challenge you. Whenever you go through the periods of anxiety, calm yourself down and say, okay, I need to stop worrying and start releasing it to God. Because you're not going to do anything without worrying. It's like a rocking chair. Anyone see an old rocking chair? It just rocks, never takes you forward. We are not designed to be warriors, by the way. Release. Psalm chapter 55 verse 22 says, cast your burden on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. It says, cast your burden on the Lord and he will sustain you. If you got the whole world spinning on it, he can sustain you. So don't worry. Don't worry. So we will encounter worry. We will encounter anxious thoughts. We're not going to be exempt from that. But when you encounter them, you start to release them and say, God, I just throw it on you. I just give it on you, God. Because you said, cast it out on me because you will sustain me. You will sustain me. Maybe you don't have a job today. I know you're worried. You need to look for a job. Nothing wrong with that. Just because you don't have a job, you don't have to worry yourself and say, I don't know how can I do it. God says, you cast it upon me and I will sustain you. That's what he did with the children of Israel. From 400 years of work, he got them to walk. And he provided for them. They didn't have to work to put food in their stomachs. God provided. And he can do the same thing to you. That doesn't mean you become lazy. You need to keep working though. Finding out. Do whatever you can do. But put your trust in the Lord. Not being worried and anxious about it. And say, God, I'm doing my best. Will you help me, oh God? He says, cast your burdens upon me. He says, I will sustain you. I'm going to take care of you. So when we learn to implement a Sabbath, my friends, we're going to do all these things. Okay, here are 3 things. What should we do? Stop. Come on, shout out. Stop. Stop working. Start resting. Stop wanting. Start receiving. Stop worrying and start releasing. That's what Jesus wants. That's how we learn to prevent ourselves from burning ourselves out. Because we learn to trust in God. We learn to rest in His promises. Rest in His word. Rest in Him. That's where your true rest finds out. So I don't know how many of you do this, but it's time for us to really get to a place of rest. So if you have a Saturday to rest, okay, rest. Rest. Don't do anything. Get your mind off your work, off your office. Spend time with your family. That's what it's all about. Rest. Rest. Spend time with your family. And remember what God has done. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. If you implement this idea, no, it's not something legalistic. It's not legalistic. No, Jesus was never for legalism. Jesus talks about it. Every other commandment that we have studied, Jesus actually refined it or made it a little bit, took it up a notch higher. If you talk about adultery, he said, it's not the act, it's the way you see, it's the way you think. And he says, it's not about the act of murder, but even if you are angry, he says, then you have committed that thing. Okay? Now, not much is said about, Jesus didn't say anything about Sabbath like that, but he said something powerful about Sabbath, okay? You see, Jesus observes the Sabbath, okay? No, nothing wrong with that. Jesus observes the Sabbath, but it does not make it a legalistic thing, okay? Because that's what the religious leaders, so the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing on that day. They were binding people. So Jesus wanted to demolish that idea, demolish that thinking pattern, and that's what Jesus did. He began to preach. When the religious elders said you should not be working, but Jesus began to preach that day, preach on Sabbaths. And not only preach, but he began to heal on the Sabbath day. And people began to the religious leaders began to find fault with Jesus, saying, how can you work on a Sabbath? And Jesus tells them, okay, if your ox is fallen, if your sheep is fallen into a ditch, won't you pick it up? And it gets us to the intent of Sabbath. The intent of Sabbath should be to glorify God and to help others if they are in need. Jesus says, hey, that's Sabbath, to honor God and also be at a place where you can help. That's what Jesus addresses. He shows that the goal of the Sabbath was not to bind people, but to free them to do good. In Mark 2:27, he says, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. So maybe some of us are work on a Sunday, or nothing wrong with that. Some of us, like our medical professionals, they have to work on Sunday. Doctors have to work on call. Law enforcers have to work on, police people have to work on call. Yeah, everyone. But the idea is, my friends, if you get to work on those, what is Sabbath day, what we call a Sabbath day, make sure you'll find another day to rest. To rest. Where you don't have to think about work. You can be with your family, thanking God for what He has given in our lives. So if you get 2 days off, Saturday, make it a day of rest. Do things that you like to do together as a family. And Sunday, now what is Sabbath for us, by the way? I'll finish with this. Sabbath, is it Saturday or Sunday for us? We should be following. What should be following? I thought Sabbath was in the Old Testament. What about us? In Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus says something powerful. He says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to... So in the light of what Jesus said, how do we observe it? I want you to look at this something. You know what? Jesus fulfilled Sabbath. He fulfilled Sabbath. On the day he was hanging on the cross, he said one statement. One of the statements that he makes is that it is finished. It is finished. What was finished? All the works that he had to do, he finished them. All the purposes that he had to fulfill, he accomplished them. All the need that he had to bring into this, all the things that he had to take care of, he said, I have done everything. And he gave up his life and he died and he rested. He rested. His body was laid to rest. That's an eternal rest. Some of us thinking, yeah, we need to get to that place. We will get to that place one day. That's when I'll get true rest. No, my friends. You can work that rest even here, right now. And Jesus rested on a Sabbath day. And he rose again. And he rose again. Now, if you remember Deuteronomy, the purpose of Sabbath, Deuteronomy, Moses talks about it, says, to remember that once you were slaves in Egypt and how God with his mighty hand brought you out. So remember your deliverance. So this is what we do whenever we come to a place like this. We are remembering that once upon a time we were slaves to the enemy. Now we have been set free by the power of God in our lives. So we remember that. So we come to worship God. So Jesus rose again, and we remember and rejoice in our salvation on the day he rose from the grave. Now somehow, over a period of time, the Jewish Sabbath, which was typically a Saturday, shifted to what we call our Christian Sabbath to a Sunday. That's why we are gathering here, because it's a Sabbath day to honor God, to make it holy. Okay? Now, does that mean that we don't have, the quality of Sabbath has gone down? No. Just the pattern changed. From 6 days to work to 1 day of rest, it changed from first day of rest, which will give you 6 days of work. Now, we do not have a clear, emphatic teaching or talking of anyone saying that we should change it from Saturday to Sunday, not nowhere in the Bible. But if you observe the pattern of what the New Testament church did, you'll find this common one thing. You'll find something called what we call the Lord's Day, which is what the first day of the week. And you see time and again, people met on the first day of the week. In Acts chapter 20, verse 7, it says, on the first day of the week, when we are gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them. Okay, first day of the week, when we gathered together, Paul spoke to them. Okay, then 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 2, on the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up. First day of the week. In Revelation chapter 1, verse 10 says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, which is the first day. That's what the Lord's day is known as, the first day of the week. So somehow, over a period of time, people began to meet on the first day of the week, which happened to be the Sunday. And later on, one of the Roman emperors, Constantine, changed it to Sunday being a holiday. And that's how somehow we landed up on Sunday as our Sabbath day. So we don't choose to rest. That's why we come, because we want to make it holy. God says, make it holy. Sabbath should be holy. It's not about you anymore. It's about Him. All that Sabbath is all about Him. So if that is the reality of the Lord's Day, if this is the essence of Christian Sabbath, what are we doing on our Sabbath? How are we making it holy? Is the question that we need to look at it. If we keep on thinking of other things on the day of Sabbath, you're not making it holy. We got to make it holy. Some of us will go up to our workplaces even though we are sick. Somehow we call in sick when it comes to the Sabbath. And we don't show up. How about this? Some of us take vacations on a Sabbath. And nothing wrong with that. I'm not against it. That's why I'm not legalistic. But where is our priority? Where's our priority? It's a heart issue, my friend. It's a priority issue. And I want to close this one last scripture. In Mark chapter 2, verse 28, it says, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. The team comes. Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. My question for all of us, is he the Lord of your Sabbath? What is consuming you on your Sabbath day? How are you making it holy? It's a time to rest, remember, right? And refocus. That's what Sabbath is all about. So can I, everyone, just close your eyes for a moment today? Is he the Lord of your Sabbath? That's what I want to ask you today. Is he the Lord of your Sabbath? If not, we got to make him the Lord of our Sabbath. We need to alter our lives. If you've been working and never took a rest, day off, it's time for us to implement that in our lives.